everyone, my name is Wrenn. I am a second year GTA and graduate student here at NAU for professional writing. I also received my undergraduate degree here from NAU in secondary education English, and I've previously taken a class with Dr. Ira before that I found was extremely illuminating and challenging and really enlightening as to the world around me in terms of rhetoric and especially with technology, which I hadn't really previously considered. With that, I'd like to start off by saying that I have kind of accidentally fallen into complacency, especially in terms of technology and security and, the sense of evaluation. And that is something I'm disappointed in myself with. So I'm very excited to be in this class and to learn more and to gain a refresher in this complicated subject of rhetoric, because as a professional writing major, I haven't had too many discussions recently, and I feel like I've kind of lost that knowledge. And so I'd like to make sure that I do have a diversified, level of knowledge in all of the areas that come with writing, because I think that makes us better writers. Um, so that's why I'm here. I'm really excited to work with all of you. As far as future careers, love to get into any form of editing or business composition, really anything that's challenging where I get to have, different assignments and kind of, once again, research, work with people. I just like anything that involves writing and involves challenging myself. So very excited for the future. But with that, I'd like to start with prefacing the Panagia article that this is a little bit difficult for me. I've done this about 7 times. So please bear with me when it comes to stutters and any kind of, repetition. This has been a fun challenge that's taken quite a bit. So hopefully I'm able to pronounce everything correctly. And if you find any flaw in my logic or analyzation, I would love to have lots of feedback. Once again, it's been a long time since I've really been involved in this subject, and I know that I have so much to learn and to refresh on. So any and all feedback is welcome, and honestly, very, very exciting for me. So with that, for Panagia's article, once again, because I haven't been in this subject area in rhetoric studies for quite some time, I had forgotten a lot of the terminology. I frankly found this article to be super, super challenging, and I ended up reading over it about it had to have been 4 or 5 times before I really felt like I was grasping what Panagia was saying. So with that, I could talk about what I learned from it and all the terms and concepts that I learned for probably like an hour or 2, but I think that that wouldn't be super pleasant for all of you, including you, Dr. Ira. So I'll just focus on one of the major quotes that I felt like took quite a bit of reviewing and researching for me to fully understand. So with that, the quote in question is, "This is perhaps the most challenging claim I make in this essay, and though I don't wish to convince readers wholeheartedly that algorithms are not representational media, I do wish to persuade readers of political theory that we can't assume that we are dealing with a medium whose ontology is representational in the manner in which we have traditionally understood the nature and character of mimetic media, like writing or painting or photography. And if I'm right that this can't be assumed, then it is also the case that a political theory of algorithms requires a rethinking of the criteria and parameters, indeed the stakes of political criticism." So this is a lot to unpack for me. Once again, I ended up reading over it several times. So for the purpose of this assignment, I'll break it down kind of by components, meaning that the first thing I wanted to talk about is this idea that algorithms are not representational media. So this confused me because oftentimes I think of algorithms as something that's really concrete. I don't often think of them as super flawed, which is obviously a flaw in my own logic, which, once again, very excited to learn here and not be so ignorant. So with that, it was the example of photographs and films that I began to understand what the author was talking about. So in other words, when you have a photograph or when you have films, first of all, they don't often mimic reality exactly. For example, with fantasy, big fantasy fan, that's not our true reality. And if we want to get down to it, once again, it's light and atoms, and it's not actual reality. It's not connected to real objects. And so with that, we can't evaluate them as reality, and we often don't. And so this same concept applies to algorithms. So for example, Panagia stated that, once again, we can't evaluate the political theory of algorithms because it requires a rethinking of the criteria and parameters. So when we think about algorithms as a representation of reality, we're evaluating algorithms based on this idea that they're the truth or that they're not flawed. And so once we recognize that they're not reality and that they're actually, once again, typically created by a person. And so with that, there comes this idea that there's most likely flaws because humans are flawed. And so we can't accept them as reality because they're only representational of what that person put into them, right? Or if they're algorithms that were, once again, I'm working on, kind of understanding algorithms a little bit better. But essentially, not to get you convoluted, the algorithms are not just accurate representations of the truth. They're not accurate representations of reality. So we have to be able to evaluate them knowing and adapted to the idea that they are not reality. So when I think of where this becomes flawed is, for example, with police identifying systems and the predictory systems, or even with Google, et cetera, oftentimes consumers will consider them as the truth. And so with that, they're not evaluating them accurately. And we want to make sure that we are, so that we can, once again, examine the rhetoric present and to also protect ourselves. So I think that he's once again emphasizing that algorithms can't just simply be fixed. So as Pollack noted, I hope I probably didn't pronounce that right. As Pollack noted, the critical approach of algorithmic reformism leads the principle of algorithmic design by proposing new algorithmic solutions to satisfy the same design problems, neglecting to acknowledge how design problems implicate consequences irrespective of this particular algorithmic solution. So in other words, it's going to be almost impossible to completely perfect algorithms, and therefore we need to have unique ways of examining them. So we have to be able to recognize such flaws and limitations and make them part of our evaluation, because they will not be perfect. So, and then I also found this quote from Louisa Moore to be really helpful, is that the output of an algorithm is never simply true or false, but is more precisely an effect of the partial relations among entities. And also with that, Panagia found that in a world where human judgment is expected to be either true or false, right or wrong, algorithms ground decision-making differently, basing it on contributed cognition, probability, correlation, and infinite recursion and recombination of outcomes. Therefore, when we examine the political theory of algorithms, the formula needs to be different from when we would analyze a product that is directly representational in media. So I know that that was a little bit repetitive, but essentially what I'm trying to emphasize is that I realized through further examination that we tend to evaluate things as black and white, right or wrong, truth or untruth, versus this is more of a gray area. It's not completely representational of reality and its complexities. So, and it's very important to recognize that algorithms are, once again, architectures of arrangements of proximity, distances, intensities, and associations, which can be super harmful to certain communities. And so, for example, Noble's research showed how the combination of decisions about the nature of classificatory structures and data-driven information management systems amplify social, economic, and especially gender and racial inequalities. So I know it seems like I'm spouting off a bunch of quotes, but the reason why I'm including them is to show that the way that I began to understand these really complicated sentences was to continue to look back and to review, because the author, Panagia, does a wonderful job of including these other sources that state his principles in a different way. And I found that that was best for my comprehension. And I think that, having those quotes is a little bit helpful for reminding yourself what the overall point is. So that's why I'm including so many of them. With that, I'm also trying to use my own words as well. So in my own words, algorithms are created by humans, which will inevitably include their biases, whether intentional or not, and whether super obvious or subtly, they're present. So that can be very harmful to certain communities, especially in terms of racism and genders and other and marginalized communities in general, right? So For example, with predictive police algorithms or other codified justice systems, it's incredibly important to recognize that, once again, those algorithms are not perfect. And so, for example, if police officers are believing that these algorithms are completely accurate, then that can lead to some seriously devastating consequences. And same with credit scoring. And I think that credit scoring, I really appreciated the insight into credit scoring because, frankly, I hadn't really thought about it. And I just thought that, once again, this was an area that I was ignorant in. But Panagia showed that the process of credit scoring is essentially secret. It's not very well known and it's not really shared, which is essentially, I keep saying essentially, I apologize, but which is almost kind of stepping on our Fourth Amendment right, which isn't okay. Meaning that algorithms do need to be evaluated politically because they can encroach on our rights. So it is a political issue. And that was something that I was really struggling with up until this point, was understanding how it conjoins with politics. And so that really helped me to further understand what exactly Panagia was talking about. So with that, his statement was really trying to emphasize that due to the harm that this can cause to certain communities, we need to recognize and evaluate as a whole and spread such information that algorithms are not perfect and that they are created by humans and therefore can contain biases. And even so, they just aren't correct and accurate depictions of reality. They're just mimicry. So I thought that was really, really important to understand. And I enjoyed kind of breaking down that quote because I struggled with this quite a bit. And so I felt like, quite an accomplishment to figure it out somewhat. And once again, maybe I'm a little bit off base. So I would love to hear some feedback. Regardless, after reading the whole of the article or work, I once again recognized how willfully ignorant and lazy I've become, because I know that there are issues among us, especially in terms of social media. I feel like that's what gets the most attention, but I think it's incredibly important that we raise the alarm as far as credit scoring and other, algorithms that are now being used to determine the kind of life that someone can have. I think that's very political and very important to evaluate. So with that, it's been easy for me to kind of not deal with it. And that's just a testament to my own privilege. And so I think that it's really important for me to, I guess what I'm trying to say is, when I read this, I realized that in my life, I can't be so lazy. This is harmful to others. It's harmful to myself. And it's really important that I learn how to evaluate these algorithms around me in my life, and that I learn to recognize them, because I think a big deal is that I just don't see them and I need to. Especially in terms of social media, I think that I need to look into ways to protect my own privacy and look into ways that I can evaluate Google and other research platforms, because especially as a teacher here at NAU, one of our bigger assignments is to assign a rhetorical analysis where they have to evaluate different sources for their bias. And so with that, I think that it would be important and impactful for me to pass on that knowledge, because even as a teacher, I have to admit that sometimes it's like, okay, just use Google Scholar or just use the Klein Library database. But that's not entirely helpful, because it's not recognizing the issues present. And I think especially in terms of Google is used so much, especially in my classroom too. It's something that I need to work on as well. So it's important that we are doing our jobs to inform others as well. And as a teacher, I think that it's really important for me to learn how to communicate to my students that Google isn't perfect, and that, it's important for them to also look around and to evaluate the sources in their life. So this has been really impactful for me to read, and I'm really excited for the rest of the class to learn more so that I can hopefully pass on that knowledge. I also would like to see what I could do as an individual to help. I'm not quite sure on that process, but especially for as far as how harmful it can be to social, economic, gender, and racial communities, I want to make sure that I'm doing what I can to advocate for others and just to try to make the world better. Not that there is any definite way that I can or that I know of yet. If you have any suggestions, let me know. But yeah, I think that it's important that I learn about the corruption around me and that I try my best to potentially do something. We'll see. I mean, this class is already doing something for me, which is wonderful. So once again, I'm trying my best not to be too embarrassed by my ignorance. some of it somewhat willful, which isn't okay, and to embrace the idea that I'm not alone in my cluelessness, especially in terms of like the idea of credit scoring. I had no idea. And so I think it's learning that it's okay not to know everything, but also not being complacent in that and being passionate about learning about the world around you. So I'm really excited to be in this class and to expand my knowledge. I don't want to be lazy in my advocacy anymore. And I know I have a lot to learn. I'm sure all of you will teach me so much. And I'm really excited to go over everyone else's videos to ensure my complete comprehension of Panagia's article. Because once again, I probably didn't understand everything perfectly, and I'm excited to learn from all of you. So thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to working with all of you.